Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, May 27th, 2025, and our friend Colin Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be with you, and thanks for avoiding the Larry.
Colonel, let's start with what Donald Trump posted today. And he said that what Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. This post come today, 2 days ago. He posted this, calling Vladimir Putin absolutely crazy. He wants to capture all of Ukraine. I knew that, and that would be the downfall of Russia. It's so strange the way that right now Donald Trump is somehow sending signals to Russia. What do you make of it?
I think he has some people, and these people range from Steve Miller to Steve Bannon to other people who are probably lesser known to us, writing for him, who occasionally get in, if not more than occasionally, I think it's more than occasionally, and write his tweets, write his messages, write his thoughts, and communicate them from the White House as if they were coming from the president. Otherwise, I have to accept the fact that I'm increasingly wanting to accept that he's crazy. Insane is not a good enough word. He's crazy. And he's suffering from, and people are beginning to hint this to me, the same kind of things Joe Biden hinted from. In other words, excess age, too old, too much pressure in the job, and too old to take it. That he is, in fact, at a point where he's beginning to show signs of dementia. So all of these things go together, plus the fact that he seems to think that this kind of bombast, if it is him writing it, and it is him saying it, or suggesting to someone to write it along those lines, it's his technique for negotiation. He's trying to force Putin back to some kind of arrangement where they can get together and have a deal. He had a choice here a few days ago, I think, between moving on and closing down Ukraine completely, and therefore meeting essentially Putin's initial demands to go into talks with Trump, even individually, not even including Zelensky. I don't think Putin gives a damn about Zelensky. I don't think Trump does either, really. He's just an impediment to a deal on both sides. And then Trump also had the choice of just walking away entirely. Well, many of us thought, the people I speak to, both inside and outside the administration, and commentators like Scott and Larry and others, thought he was walking away. Well, how do you walk away and rail like this? You're not really walking away if you're railing like this. You're, at best, if someone's interpreting your comments as being sane in any way, fashion, or form, trying to gain some negotiating leverage by threatening Putin. Why else would you threaten him? I mean, after all, what you want ultimately is a better relationship with Russia. So it's nonsensical. It's even stupid. It's even ignorant to threaten Putin this way. If you're walking away, walk away. And as you walk away, let Putin know, let Lavrov know that you're going to negotiate over more important things like nuclear weapons and an eventual security architecture for Europe and other things like that. Because walking away from Russia completely is truly stupid. If for nuclear weapons alone, it is truly stupid. So, I mean, I can only interpret this as more Trump's idiocy or the people around him's idiocy.
Here is, Colonel, what General Keith Kellogg said about Donald Trump and his post.
And this guy, Nima, this guy, let me just preface this. This guy is out of it. He is completely out of it. He's as bad as David Petraeus. Remember the days when Petraeus was saying the Ukrainian military would roll over Russia? Doesn't pay any penalty for that. Doesn't pay any cost for making these idiotic statements he made. And it's the same way with Kellogg. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
But we know that, Larry, these people are part of the administration. That's why we have to hear them.
Well, we've got dogs, cats, and morons as part of the administration. So, it's hard to figure out who's speaking for whom when.
Yeah.
Okay, continually apply some type of pressure to the Russians to get them to the table and make a determination on where they want to be. When President Trump spoke with President Putin a little over a week ago, the Russians said they were going to come up with what they call a memorandum, which what I call a term sheet. What a term sheet means is, okay, this is how we get to peace. We've got that from the Ukrainian side. We need to get that from the Russian side. And then what you do is you meld them together. You put them together and say, okay, what does this look like? What is not acceptable? Right. What's acceptable? Where can you go to bring it together? And once we do that, once we get their term sheet or memorandum, then we'll put it together, and then there's going to be another meeting, and we believe it'll be probably in Geneva. We would like to have had it in the Vatican, and we were pretty set to do something like that, but the Russians didn't want to go there, to the Vatican. So I think Geneva may be the next stop, and then you eventually go to somewhere where you get all three major leaders of all the parties. You get the President Putin, President Zelensky together and hammer this thing out and come to some type of signed document that ends this war.
Go ahead, Larry.
You already have the terms, General Kellogg. The terms have been laid out by Sergei Lavrov and Vladimir Putin and others dozens of times until they're probably really sick and tired of speaking to you and laying out the terms. You already have the terms, and the terms are effectively, we have won. There are no conditions that we will accept on that victory. And if you don't want the victory and you don't want to acknowledge it, we'll just keep on marching. Thank you very much. Those are the terms, General Kellogg. And no matter how much you stand up and pontificate about there being a term sheet, about there being some possibility of meeting with Zelensky, Putin, and Trump and having the term sheet be what you negotiate over, is ludicrous. Putin has already told you there will be no ceasefire, there will be no negotiations. I've given you my conditions. Now you either accept them or go away, and I'll finish my war.
Larry, we know that they were attacking Ukrainians. Ukrainians tried to kill Vladimir Putin when he went to the Kursk region. And when you look at the situation and you put yourself in the shoes of Russians and look at who's providing the intelligence. Is it Washington? Is it the United Kingdom? Is it all the European countries together with Washington? Because if they could achieve that and killing Vladimir Putin, what would that mean for the conflict in Ukraine?
I don't think it would mean a thing, except that would put the hardliners, if you will. I don't like that term, but I guess it suffices. It would put the more robust support of the war people in the Duma and elsewhere. It would put them in the driver's seat to do what probably Putin, I think, has been a restraint on. There would be no more restraints, in other words. Bye-bye, Kiev. You want some Oreshnik missiles down on top of you, Volodymyr Zelensky? Welcome. We'll give you some. I think the war would get more robust from the Russian position, and it would do so almost overnight if you got rid of Putin. Putin is prudent. Putin is circumspect. Putin wants a better relationship with the United States. I'm not so sure there are too many Putins in that regard in Moscow now. There are a lot of people who think the United States is duplicitous, untrustworthy, not to be dealt with, an imperial entity on the decline, and we need to look elsewhere and do things elsewhere and not depend at all on Washington because they are utterly undependable. So you want that kind of leadership in Moscow, you might get it. And I think you will regret it tenfold, and you will regret it pretty quickly. So take the sane people out, like Sergei Lavrov and Vladimir Putin, and and I shouldn't say sane because I think they're all pretty sane, but there are people who are willing to do a lot more than Putin is willing to do with regard to bringing this to closure.
We know that the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, said that United Kingdom, together with Germany and France, again, United States going to be there they're gonna lift. They have already left all the all the restrictions on the weapons, the type of weapons that they're gonna send to Ukraine. This is when it comes to Germany, at least we can think of Taurus missiles, the way that they can escalate. Again, the same game, getting back to the Biden administration. Taurus missiles, we're gonna send it, we're not gonna send it. It seems that the game is starting again.
Yeah, just at the time that Merz, who does not represent the majority of the German people, far from the majority of the German people, just as Merz is showing a little ankle, if you will, on Gaza, and began to speak more or less like Macron and Starmer and Canada in terms of the atrocities that Israel is involved in. He's tightening up on the Ukraine conflict. It makes no sense, and it makes no sense in the sense of Taurus in particular, because that's a game changer. And if you want to get Putin on the side of the people I was just referring to, if you want some really relentless pounding of Kyiv and of Ukraine in general, and you want Odessa to disappear tomorrow morning, just go ahead. Fire a few of those Taurus missiles into Russia. He's already said this is a new dimension to the game. This is a dimension that I think he has pretty categorically defined as NATO is in the war and participating, and I will respond accordingly. So pick your capital, pick your place in NATO that missiles are going to rain down on. God help us if they're non-conventional, if they're nuclear. I don't think there will be initially, at least, but I think you could wake up in Warsaw. You could wake up in any of the puny states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. You could even wake up in Norway and Lithuania or Sweden or one of those countries with you're in the war now. You're in the war big time now, because Putin said this, and Putin doesn't usually say these things without meaning them. If you come in NATO, I will hit you.
Do you see the possibility of NATO on the Ukrainian soil, the way they're talking about?
With Starmer, not Starmer, Merz, I could see that happening. But I think I like to think anyway, because he doesn't represent a majority. I think at best he represents maybe 35% of the German people, and that's decreasing, I think, even as he talks more about this sort of thing. And I think they'll throw him out. I would hope they would, that he would collapse. His government, his coalition would collapse, because I don't see how he holds it together if he takes a posture where he's going to war with Russia through Ukraine now, and directly with Russia if Taurus missiles are shot, because Putin knows they're not going to be shot without NATO or German or probably both satellite feed and intelligence. They're just not. And then one has to ask the question, does Trump know this? Does Trump know that we're going to be shooting these missiles, probably using the U.S. satellite system and using U.S. intelligence? And does he realize what Putin has said, and that Putin means it about this being a new dimension to the war? I don't think if you ask Trump that question, he'd be able to give you a good answer. So, okay, Merz, you're out, Friedrich, you're out there on your own now. You want a war with Russia? Maybe you'll get it, and your people don't want it. So what do you think is going to happen to you after you start this war, and after Putin gives you a visible sign that you have in fact started this war, and that NATO is now a very front of the lines member of this war, as it has been all along, actually. And Putin's been killing NATO members all along, too. Some of these targets he's hit, he knows damn well who is there. And he's killed NATO members. He's killed U.S. personnel. He's killed German personnel. He's killed Swedish personnel. And he knows, his intelligence is pretty good too, he knows he's killing them. And we know he's killing them. But so far it hasn't led to an expansion of the war to the point where it gets out of control. This Taurus missile could take it to that point. And Merz is acting as if he doesn't know that. Or he knows it and wants it, which just is baffling to me. Unless he's taking his BlackRock portfolios into this war and thinking of money rolling in over the threshold that's unprecedented. I got news for him. The blood that accompanies that money is going to offset that money with his political structure.
If you were to point out who's the most influential characters right now among the European countries, who's going to be that person? Is that Stormer or Merz?
Well,
maybe Macron.
I think that's what Merz is looking for. I think he wants to be the big guy in NATO and the big guy that, takes the ultimate chance. And I don't think that's what the majority of the German people want. And I'm not just talking about AfD. I'm talking about the other sections of the German political structure. I don't think they want that. And there are people even in the Christian Democrats that don't want that. So why is he doing this is the huge question. Why is he acting this way when the political circumstances in Germany do not dictate he act this way? It doesn't make any sense to me, unless there's some other motivation for it. And those other motivations, Nima, are the kinds of things that, assassinate archdukes in Sarajevo and start World War I. Those are the things that nobody ponders until afterwards. Well, why did they do this? And why did he do this? Well, let's do some analysis here and research. Let's see why I did this. And invariably, you overturn some reasons. Usually, those reasons lead back to money. But I can't figure why Merz would be really willing to risk a NATO-Russia war over income. I just can't. For defense contractors, for German or American defense contractors, or for any other purpose. But Merz is basically a money man. I mean, he's the guy that thinks about the gold all the time.
You mean, Larry, if to put it simply in a very simple manner, can we say that BlackRock has somehow some sort of ties in Ukraine that they cannot give up on Ukraine?
Well,
it's also part of that plan.
Well, that's true, and that there is an incredible feeling that if they don't push against China here, and I know no one's really brought this up a lot, but it is there. If they don't push against China's overwhelming entry into not just Southwest Asia now with the rail line going into Iran, but also the central part of Europe with the rail line coming into the central part of Europe, where Ukraine was going to be the debouching point. It was going to be the entrepot, the place where that rail line terminated, at least initially. So this is all about China too, and it's about stopping China and stopping this, as I've said before, inexorable movement of power away from the West, which includes Europe, and towards the East.
Yeah.
I'm sure BlackRock has all manner of analysis on this and is placing their bets accordingly as to what this will mean if the West loses out in the big game of all, the economic game, the trade game. And Trump isn't helping that at all. He's not helping it at all. Nima, can you imagine how many of Trump's buddies have made money off the U.S. stock market because he tells them when he's going to say, tariff here, tariff there, tariff here, tariff there, and the stock market plunges and they buy, and then he comes out and he says, oh, I'm not going to do those tariffs. And then the stock market goes back up again. His buddies, his cronies are making a fortune off the market right now because of his help. He's helping them to make a fortune. And a lot of these buddies are Vanguard, State Group, BlackRock at the top of the pile. That's Trump. He's orchestrating the markets to make money for his buddies and for himself. No question about that. He's making tons of money for his family too, because they're all playing it. They're all playing it. He times the tariff statements, especially the more draconian ones, with their buying of stocks when they plummet. And then he comes back off and they sell when it gets back up to this price that they fell from. I mean, it's so blatant that one would think someone in the Congress would actually, but they're making money off of it too, because I'm quite confident some of the Republicans in the Congress are getting forward. They're getting word beforehand on these tariff announcements and so forth, and they're doing the same thing. They're doing essentially insider trading, with the president of the United States being the insider.
That makes perfect sense to me, because you look at the plan on the part of Donald Trump. He's talking about ceasefire. Russia doesn't agree. He talks about, let's talk in Vatican.
Yeah.
Why is that? It's so strange. Everything is somehow unrealistic, unbelievably unrealistic.
Yeah.
And everybody, even a little child, knows that Russia wouldn't agree with a negotiation in Vatican because they're not Catholic. Because it's all.
And the idea that they're going to put more draconian, quote unquote, sanctions on Russia is really risible. It's laughable, because what we have done with the sanctions to this point on Russia, which are not like many Trumpites are saying, Biden was really weak on sanctions because he didn't want the price of oil to rise. That's hogwash. The sanctions have been pretty draconian. And what they have done is forced Russia into the arms of the rest of the world. And their economy is fairly healthy right now because of that embrace. Like I was telling you before, China got 90.4% or 94%, something like that, of its oil from Russia last year. That's not going to stop. Maybe Iranian oil now, with the railroad working, will rival some of that percentage. But it's not even that the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz is nearly as strategic as it was before, because much of that 20% of the world's oil that was flowing out of the Persian Gulf and out of Ras Tanura and the other facilities that Saudi runs, much of that has been replaced now by Russia. I'd love to see what it is now. I haven't been able to get my hands on the exact figures. Everybody talks about fiscal 23 or fiscal 24. I haven't seen the figures on what the Red Sea situation has done to it, and what the situation with the railroads operating now, and Iran selling its oil pretty much at free will, and Russia selling its oil to the quantities that it is to China. I suspect the Persian Gulf is not nearly as critical as it was before. I don't know that, but I suspect. I'd say it might be down to as low as 8 to 10% of the world's oil going through the strait, rather than 20%. But no one's going to tell you that, because everybody's playing with the markets right now, particularly the fungible oil markets, because they want to keep the empire wants to keep the oil price down for this holiday period. And there are others who are waiting to disturb that greatly when they can, and they probably will. And one of those waiting is OPEC. Now, we forget that Russia and OPEC sort of work together in how they keep the oil prices where they want them to be. And we haven't seen the end of this yet. We're driving around right now in our neighborhood, Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, Maryland, and so forth, and we're looking at oil prices at the pump, being $1 less for Memorial Day and we know that's fake. We know that they're just, they're priming the pumps for the crisis that's coming. And we're just busting our ass with these, with the Permian Basin and other places in this fracking effort. And the only place where fracking makes any sense, because it takes, to get a fracked barrel of crude out of the ground, or to get methane out of the ground, which is really, really a product of the Permian Basin now, so much so that we don't even know what to do about the environment. They're polluting the environment majorly with this methane, because they're so sloppy in extracting it. But to get just, let's take a barrel of crude out of the ground, costs about $51, $52 because it's so expensive to frack. Well, it costs anywhere from $8 to $12 for the Saudis to get that same crude oil barrel out of the ground. So if you don't balance this some way, you're going to lose your ass when the price of oil goes down per barrel to a point where fracking has to shut down. And these people lose all their money who have invested heavily in places like the Permian Basin. So it's a game going on right now. And I've got a real strong feeling we aren't going to win that game. And Russia and China and Iran and Saudi Arabia are going to win that game because they are better at it than we are. We use brute force and sanctions. They use the price of that barrel. And that price of that barrel ultimately is more powerful than the other things. So it remains to be seen if this kind of strategy we're pursuing right now is going to work. We could plummet from being the number one in terms of all products, seller, producer of crude and its products in the world, down to being quite low overnight, because it just becomes economically infeasible to continue the practices we're using to get the product out of the ground.
Since you
What
mentioned,
do you think the bond markets will do then? they're already shivering because people are looking at them and saying, well, we were just downgraded again by Moody's. Should we really buy U.S. bonds anymore? And even Americans are thinking that. Are we really going to get the interest back that they're claiming we're going to get when we have $30 trillion of aggregate debt, and we will have $50 trillion in the next decade, and $2 trillion a year interest payments on that debt? There's some place in there where the confidence of even the American buyer of these bonds plummets. And when that happens, bye-bye empire.
Since you mentioned oil and the price of oil, we know that one of the main whisperers of these sanctions on Russia is this Secretary of Treasury in the United States, and they feel that they can put a lot of pressure on Russia in terms of sanctions. If they put sanctions on Russia, if they go in that direction, the way that Donald Trump is communicating right now, I think that could come. We can not just simply ignore that sort of possibility. But how about China and India? Are they going to play? Is Donald Trump able to put pressure on them or to convince them to get along with the United States?
Let me put it this way. Every ounce of sanction pressure that the Secretary of the Treasury, Donald Trump, OFAC puts on Russia will be compensated for by China, even India, and other countries almost instantly. And that's the fact of the matter. So you're looking at, as I've said, the empire speeding up, not arresting by any means, that would be impossible anyway, but not even slowing down, which could be done, this inexorable shift of power. We are actually pushing this power to the east. And we're doing it with our eyes wide open, if you think insane people can have open eyes, because I think these people are insane. Now, I have to admit that there are people like BlackRock behind this, like the Rothschilds of old, like J.P. Morgan of old, like other financiers of old. They're behind it, and I'm confident they're monitoring it almost on an hourly basis. And will they weigh in, and will the weight of the combined monies associated with these people, will it shift things somewhat at the last minute and maybe arrest some of this inexorable movement of the shift of power to the east? I don't know. I think what they'll do, Nima, I actually think what they'll do is they'll do what others like them have done throughout history. They'll shift their flag. And by that, I simply mean they'll back the other side. And they have plenty of assets in those countries of the other side to do that, to just abandon the empire and write it off. And that's when we have the true deep crisis. You know, we haven't had this kind of debt and this kind of potential for a lack of confidence to destroy everything overnight since really two times. One at the beginning of the country, one during the Civil War for a moment there, for more than a moment. And then at the height of the Great Depression and the expenditures for World War II in terms of initially. I mean, those were two times when our debt was commensurate with what it is now. Three times, actually. At the beginning, it was a different ballgame, but I mean, at the beginning, every kind of currency in the world worked in the United States. You bought things with French francs, you bought things with German marks, you bought things with other people's currencies, and gold and silver and furs and whatever you could muster in terms of commodity exchange. But this is I think this is a worse situation than either of those previous situations, even worse than the Civil War, because we have so little recognition amongst both the leadership, and I mean all three branches, and the people of what's coming. We have, and that makes it even more traumatic and titanic when it does come, when no one is expecting it. And everyone's counting on everything from, their salaries to the equity in their home, all the things that the 50% of America counts on to keep it from starving to death from week to week is going to disappear. Then the president's attention will be elsewhere, is what I'm trying to say.
The other day I talked with Paul Carrick-Roberts, and he mentioned something that could be the case for the situation between Russia and the United States. He says that the way that Russia is fighting in Ukraine, because they're waiting to get something like Yalta agreement with the United States. That's why they want something big. They want an agreement, a very comprehensive agreement with the United States. But at the same time, Donald Trump is not the guy to deliver that, to go ahead and make a deal with Russia. Your take on that?
Well, Donald Trump tried to intimate during the campaign and then immediately after the inauguration that he was, that he was another FDR in terms of, I don't care about this Ukraine war. I want it to stop because it's in my way of making a new relationship with Russia that will do everything from take care of a treatyless world with regard to nuclear weapons to assuring Europe and Russia get along. So, because I can't have a fractious Europe in Russia's face if I want to have this relationship. That's kind of the image that Trump gave off. At least that's the way I perceived it. And now I have to think that many of his advisors have gotten to him, some of them from the old gang, the blinking, winking, blinking, and nudge, nod and nudge team. They've gotten to him and they've told him that you can't do this. One, you'll alienate the leaders of NATO. Good, alienate them. They're nothing but bums anyway. And two, you're going to look feckless for any political means or reason you want to continue to be president if you can't take care of this situation. Well, he was willing initially, in my view, to rise above that. And he had to, technically, supposedly, he couldn't go for a second term. So why not rise above that and create this new, incredibly new relationship between Russia and the United States that ultimately embraces Europe, no matter how difficult that embrace is after this conflict. But I don't think it would be nearly as difficult as some people are thinking if we get rid of the present leadership, which shouldn't be that hard to do. Let's just have elections. The countries do not like their leaders. Let's get rid of them. Their leaders, we put in. As I've said many times, they're leaders over the last 15, 20 years that we put in. Color revolutions, call them, in every one of these damn countries. Not just the ones that we really screwed up in, like Georgia and I want to say Romania, although now we've affected it in Romania apparently, but that was a mistake. And here we are now back into the internecine kind of crap and squabbling that we're in before Trump. We're back into Biden's days, and that was supposed to go by the wayside. Trump was supposed to discard that. And many people, I think, voted for him for that purpose. Not a majority, but a lot of people voted for him for that purpose. He's going to lose those people, just like he's going to lose the Republican Congress in the midterms, because he's got Republicans. Watch this big bill, this big, beautiful bill. The Republicans are going to derail that in the Senate. I'm quite confident. What was the vote in the House? 214 to 215? I think that was the vote in the House to get Johnson's big, beautiful bill passed for Big Donald. Well, the Senate is already talking about that ain't going to pass. It is not going to pass. So it's already falling apart for him domestically. It's going to really fall apart in the midterms unless he does something spectacular, which is what he said he was going to do in the war in Ukraine and re-establish a decent relationship with Russia. Well, he's done none of that. He's done none of that. So far, he's a total failure. Security-wise and domestically, he's a total failure. That can't be registering very well with him if someone has the common sense to tell him that, hey, boss, you're really not doing much of what you said you were going to do, not successfully.
He said that on the Iranian front, he feels somehow optimistic and he can get something big. When he talks this way, I remember when he talks with Vladimir Putin, he comes out and everything's fine. It was very good, very beautiful talk. But after 2 days, it's just demolished. It destroys everything.
And that's because he can't keep his team together, as far as I can see. He fired Waltz apparently for making a fool out of Witkoff, essentially, with regard to Iran. And now everybody's doing the same thing to the extent that Witkoff is making a fool of himself. So someone told me the other day that, oh, well, you don't understand, because what the Iranians have hinted at, they're so desperate for sanctions relief and to prevent war, and they're worried about Netanyahu expanding the war at any moment, that they're willing to go for 3 or 4 years without any enrichment at all. In other words, they wouldn't disestablish their program, but they would put it in hiatus for 3 or 4 years. They would not enrich anything to no percentage whatsoever for 3 or 4 years. And then the view would be that they could start back up to 3.7 or whatever percent. I don't even think they'll do that. I don't think that's part of it, but I was told that that's why Witkoff is saying what he's saying, because he's going to present it as, see, we cancel all the enrichment. Well, not only would that probably not wash, might with stupid Americans, but I just don't think I think that's a red line for them. I really do. I don't know. You may disagree with me, but I think that's a red line that they must maintain. They put so many billions of dollars, so much blood, assassinated scientists and such into it. And let's face it, they're in an extraordinarily dangerous region, made so by the United States and Israel. That's who makes the Southwest Asia, the Levant, a dangerous region. Israel is the prima facie, in your face case of making it a dangerous region, proving it every day now. Every single day they prove it. They prove it to the point now where you even got European leaders who are feckless cowards saying things about Netanyahu and about what they're doing. And you've even got, I saw the video the other day, you may have seen it. You've even got thousands of Israelis going to the Rafah checkpoint and protesting what's happening. I watched the video, and I watched the police actually go and stop the few radical Ben Gvir types who came up and started yelling epithets at them, profanities at them, and telling them they were traitors and everything. I watched the security police, Israeli security police, push them back and keep them away from these protesters. So things are changing, not fast enough, but they're changing with regard to the atrocities that Israel is creating. But all that means to me is Netanyahu will get so desperate, he will start the war with Iran, knowing the United States will come in, knowing that Trump won't have any choice. So I think the Iranians want sanctions relief, and I think they want to prevent that. I don't know how they prevent the mad dog Bibi from doing that, but maybe he'll fall before he has a chance to expand the war that far. But they do desperately want a deal, I think. I think that's true. I think that's a fair statement, but not to the point where they will give up, literally give up, and turn the other cheek and say, smack me again.
Do you think that Donald Trump, they're saying to Netanyahu that while we're talking, negotiating with Iran, if you do something stupid, we're not going to support you?
I'm not sure what you're coming
Yeah, the question is, if Donald Trump, while the United States is negotiating with Iran, if Netanyahu decides to do something stupid, I don't know, an attack on Iran.
Well, I'm hearing that the word underneath, if you will, the current underneath that Trump is sort of pushing at Netanyahu is not only you're going to have to stop, and you're going to have to stop sooner rather than later. You're going to have to make a deal to get the hostages back, and you're going to have to go into a permanent ceasefire. And oh, by the way, you're not going to run Gaza afterwards. I'm hearing those are the components of the message that we're sending subterraneously, if you will, to Bibi, and that he's angry as hell about it. And that may just motivate him to go ahead and do what you and I were just saying, that he might expand the war just to, put his thumb in Trump's face. I don't know. I wouldn't put anything past Bibi. I wouldn't put anything past him. I know the economic, the financial, the military straits in Israel are getting to the point now where I would say, as I've been hinting at, there's an existential threat to the continuation of the state of Israel. And I can't imagine that Bibi doesn't smell that. He doesn't sense it. And what he's doing is doubling and tripling down on the draconian measures that he takes instead of relaxing a bit, because I think he feels like the dictator riding the tiger, He feels like if he dismounts, the tiger will eat him. If he stays on the tiger, he'll die, but he'd rather stay on the tiger and not go to jail. And oh, by the way, he'd like to take on Iran in the process. He'd like to whip the tiger into an attack on Tehran. And that's what scares me about the situation, because I do not believe that Donald Trump, as he has said, won't be with him. I mean, Donald Trump apparently has said that he will not back Netanyahu in a war against Iran. Was that a negotiating ploy? Was that the truth? I don't know, but my guess would be that if Netanyahu gets Israel in a true existential mess vis-a-vis Iran, then the United States will be there. I'm told, Lima, by competent people that the strike packages are already assembled, that the jets are ready, that the plan is intact, approved, and all it takes is the word and it starts. And Israel puts on a full court press for days on end, as long as it can do it. I don't think it can do it very long against Iran, with the expectation that on the third or fourth day, particularly if Israel is if Iran is responding like I know they can and probably will, won't have anything to lose at that point, that Israel will be in dire straits. You talk about missiles hitting Ben Gurion.
Yeah. These things get out of the hand so easily that this is so dangerous.
This is how big wars start. Stupid people messing around in little wars. This is how big wars start. Because
Israel is they're not capable of, because any sort of attack on Israel would be devastating. Israel is just look at the size of Israel. The country is not that big. That I don't know why they're doing this. Why Netanyahu? Do they really feel the people in Israel? You mentioned the people in Israel. How do they feel about it? Do they really want a big war with Iran? Because
I think the sad thing is those who haven't left, who are Israeli Jews. I understand. It's about it was about 14.7 million Israeli Jews, constituting about 7 million or so, and Palestinians about 7.6 million or whatever. I'm told the population on the Jewish side is down by 1 million now. And what it is many people have just left and are waiting to see what happens and whether or not they're going to go back. And some are stranded, because the airlines won't fly into Ben Gurion now, other than the Israeli airline. I think one other. And so they're stranded somewhere. They went somewhere to get out of the situation, or take a long extended vacation or just to take a real vacation, and they can't get back to Israel because the airlines aren't flying back. So you've got a real kernel of Israeli Jews now. I would say it is the majority. I don't know what the percentage would be, maybe 80%, maybe 75%, that is all for what Netanyahu is doing. They do not like what he's doing with respect to the hostages, a huge percentage of them. And they do not like what he's doing with regard to going back in and staying there to provide security and such. They want him to wipe the people out. They do. And that's a sorry statement to have to make. They want people to die. But then you've got Jews, on the other hand, that are saying things like, I read quotes, how can I raise my babies in this country when we're killing babies right across the line? Those Jews who were out there protesting off of Rafah. And there are others like that, and I think it's growing slowly. But answer to your question is, sad to say, the majority of Israelis support the killing that Netanyahu is doing. And of course, the real radicals amongst them don't think he's killing them fast enough or thoroughly enough. So Israel, to say this is to say the truth, I think. Israel will deserve its downfall. Now, there are people that won't. There are people, like I said, who realize Netanyahu is a butcher and that Israel has become a state they don't even recognize. There are quite a few of them, but they don't constitute a majority by any means. They will suffer. They will suffer unjustly. But the majority of the Jews in Israel will suffer justly because of what they have supported and what they are fully for with regard to slaughter and murder.
There is a term in psychology. It says that the witness of a crime is the victim of the crime.
Yes, and Martin Luther King said, if you're standing there and the crime occurs and you don't do anything about it, you're more guilty than the person that committed the crime. Injustice observed is no justice at all. And if you do nothing about it, then you become complicit. It's like the old general used to say to me, Lieutenant, if you walk by that cigarette butt or that piece of paper on that post without directing someone to pick it up or picking it up yourself if there's no one around to direct, you're guilty and I will punish you. I came to understand what he meant. I mean, that's responsibility. And Jesus Christ said it. As you do this in the smallest way, you do it unto me.
The government in the United Kingdom somehow doesn't know. It's so much confused, or maybe they're not confused. They know what they're doing, but they're making some sort of noises to make us confused. They said that they're going to put pressure on Israel. And David Lammy came out and he was talking. Everybody was just clapping. He said that we're going to end. We're not going to have any sort of economic ties with Israel. We're not going to send this and that to Israel if they do this. And today we've learned that they have sent the trade envoy to Israel to talk. This is unbelievable. And here is what the conservative leader Kemi Badenoch said on Sky News about the conflict in Gaza.
They support the current Israeli action, and that actually you think that Mr. Netanyahu's language on this is justified.
I'm not here to police the language of the Prime Minister of Israel.
I'm not asking you to police it. I'm asking
what he has said.
People need to know where you stand.
Yeah, but I've been very clear where I stand. Hamas is a terrorist group. They are not our friends.
I'm talking about what you think about the Israelis'
Yes, but it's all related. Who funds Hamas? Iran. An enemy of this country. An enemy of this country. Israel is fighting a proxy war on behalf of the UK, just like Ukraine is on behalf of the Western Europe against Russia. We have to get serious. We have to get serious. There was a terrorist plot in London against the Israeli embassy. We saw 2 Jewish members of the Israeli embassy in DC killed. Whose side are we on? We need to make sure that the hostages are returned. No one wants to see a war in Gaza. Palestinians are suffering. Netanyahu is complaining that he thinks our leaders are carrying out the wrong action. He has every right to say that. What I want to see is Keir Starmer making sure that he is on the right side of British national interest. That cannot.
Then you need to get a new Bible to read from, lady, if you are wanting Keir Starmer to be on the side of Britain's national interest. Because what he's on the side of course, and what London has been on the side of since Tony Blair, is the United States. They had a meeting. Blair and Bush had a meeting out at what was it, Crawford, Texas, I guess, where Bush's ranch was. And Colin Powell came back and debriefed me on the meeting. And in that meeting, in essence, Powell didn't put it this way, but I asked him afterwards, "Are you really telling me that Tony Blair is now in for a penny, in for a pound for the special relationship?" I'm telling you that he has judged that the relationship with America is more important than independent foreign policy and security policy on the behalf of London. And let's just take what she said. Let's take that ignorant woman's words. In Argentina and elsewhere, Israel has pulled off false flag operations and then blamed them on locals, terrorists. I'm not at all convinced that what happened in London recently wasn't a similar operation. I would even go so far and to say I would not put it past Bibi Netanyahu and his directions to Mossad to come to the United States and assassinate some Israeli citizens. Call it the Hannibal Doctrine extended. I'm no doubt that Israel and Mossad would do this sort of thing, especially if they thought support was waning a bit, even a little bit. They would do this sort of thing. So I don't count for a moment that these are anti-Semitic acts, certainly, and I don't count for a moment that they're perpetrated unprompted by Israel. Just as maybe you saw the interview with the MI5 agent, retired MI5 agent, who talked about the explosion in front of the Israeli embassy in London. And the conclusion of MI5 was Israel did it. Israel did it. It was a controlled detonation, and then they could blame it on, terrorists, Iranian terrorists, Hamas, whomever. Israel does that. Routinely, Israel does that. All across the globe, they do that. They do it in the United States. So I don't watch anything anymore with the certitude that that lady evinced in that interview. And furthermore, there is absolutely no reason for any leader in the world this late in the game to not be criticizing the wholesale slaughter that has transpired since October the 7th and is now transpiring to the point where yesterday, I think it was 75 who died. A friend of mine, special operator, special forces guy, he sent me a note and he said, "Have you noticed how every time they kill 24 or 30 civilians, it was a Hamas command post or command center or a Hamas-directed operation going on that the civilians were either protecting or around when the Israelis killed them, and they even started an investigation afterwards?" I said, yeah, they couldn't possibly have that many command posts. And that's what he said too. And they couldn't possibly have that many civilians clustered around Hamas operation centers. There's just no way on God's green earth they could do it. And then they do what they did with me when they murdered Nima, Rachel Corrie, the U.S. citizen who was over there protecting Palestinian homes, and the bulldozer killed her with its blade. They then hold investigations, and they announce that they'll hold investigations. They never hold the investigations. They just go ahead and continue to do the things they're doing. They're killing 70 to 80 people a day. The aid they've let in is still a pittance of what is needed. At least some got in, but it's a pittance of what's needed. 500 plus trucks a day is what's needed. So it's becoming almost unconscionable for London, for Paris, for Berlin, for any of these capitals, for Washington to continue to support this without saying something to begin to distance themselves from Netanyahu and move away from him. But like you said, they go right over and do the free trade agreement that they said they weren't going to do in the parliament. anyway. But many world leaders, if not all of them, are going to have to start backing away from this, or they're going to ruin their futures. I mean, they're going to mar their futures irretrievably. Worse than that, they're going to have destroyed, complicit with the empire, every bit of international humanitarian law, every bit of international criminal justice, every bit of international law, period, that we've painstakingly constructed since World War II, and they're going to destroy it completely. And they're going to rue the day that they did that, because, you know, you wind up needing that law and it isn't there anymore. You wind up needing the court and it's not there anymore. Whether your need is nefarious like the United States, we use the court. We use the court to go after black people that we didn't like in Africa. That's why they went after Milosevic finally, because he was white. And they felt like they had to get, you know, some white people on the docket. We're destroying it. We're destroying the whole apparatus we built up. And we single-handedly have led this effort. And Trump is no aid to that, because Trump literally states his dislike and hatred even for these sorts of components of international business and diplomacy, whether it's the ICJ, the ICC, or the UN itself, or whatever. And he sent Waltz up there to the UN. He wanted to get rid of Waltz. Obama, he sent Samantha Power up there because he wanted to get rid of Samantha Power because she led him into the war in Libya, along with Hillary Clinton. Should have sent Hillary up there to be permanent undersecretary for bullshit, you know. But we're destroying all this. We're destroying it. And others are helping us. Others, like in London and Paris, and they will rue the day that they have done this. When this big war starts, there will be no one out there. No one out there to keep us from being the heathens, the dogs, the Schutzstaffel, the the SS types that we have the potential to be every day of the week. These were restraints, as Sir Nigel Rodley said. We bother the buggers with this stuff. And what he meant really was we were restraints. We were restraints on this kind of action in the world. Well, Bibi Netanyahu is saying, restraints be damned. I can kill men, women, and children endlessly, and no one will stop me. And I have a nation behind me. Well, he has a nation behind him, all right. A nation of Cretans.
Larry, what's so amazing to me is the capability of these people to use people of colors, like this woman that was talking about, Kemi Badenoch. She's an African British, but the way that she talks, it seems that this is our proxy war that Israel is fighting for us.
She admitted the truth.
She reminds me of the U.S. ambassador to the UN under the Biden administration.
Yes, very much so.
Unbelievable.
Without the British accent. Yeah. I couldn't believe that woman. I had to turn her off. I couldn't listen to her after a while. And I kept saying to myself, now, all the black experience that you've had, Larry, the things that Powell has taught you about the black experience in America, he spent 16 years lecturing me roughly, every day for some reason, this, that, or the other thing, about the black experience, until it was drummed into my head. I realized something I hadn't realized as a white man, especially a white man from the South of the United States. And these people are betraying that. They're betraying that. Trying to be more white than the white man. That's what they're doing. And they're betraying their heritage. They're betraying their knowledge. They're betraying everything they should stand for, which is human rights first, human rights second, and human rights third. Because your experience in the world has taught you that. If it hasn't, you were really lucky, but you ought to learn the lesson anyway. But they don't. They become whiter than the white man.
Thank you so much, Carl, for being with us today.
Good to be with you. Sorry that we can't talk about something a little more positive.
And the things are not positive.
Unfortunately. In my 80 years on this earth, they're as negative as they've been. And I lived through Korea, World War II, born in the middle of World War II. lived through Korea, lived through Vietnam, fought in Vietnam, lived through Iraq 1, Iraq 2, Afghanistan, and this is as bad as it's been in my entire life. I don't know where the empire is headed except inexorably down.
Thank you, Colin.
Sure.
See you soon, Larry.
Take care.
Let me know, by the way.
Yeah, we should be able to do it Friday. I'll let you know what the Russians say ultimately.
Okay.
Take care.
See you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.